So hi everyone, we're going to be going over problem 3, which is team ball. And so in this problem, we're going to write team baller, which is a subclass of baller. An instance of team baller cheers on the team every time it passes a ball, and then states that it doesn't have the ball when it doesn't. The last thing it does is that it returns a Boolean saying whether or not the ball has been passed. If the ball did not pass the ball, it'll say that it hasn't done so, and it will return false. We're going to assume that baller has a defined pass ball method. So in the dot tests, which is the first thing we want to look at, we see that we have this behavior. In this example, Alyssa is a ball hog, cheer baller is a team baller. And when cheer baller dot pass ball Alyssa, we get yay and true, meaning that the ball was passed. And then if cheer baller dot pass ball Alyssa again, we get that I don't have the ball as printed, and that false is returned because the ball was in fact not passed. And so the first thing we want to emphasize here is that with inheritance, we have an is a relationship. So because team baller is a baller, team baller will inherit all of the methods, instance variables, and constructors of the superclass or the parent class being baller. And so that's pretty important here. And so we're going to note that here. So this is a general notation thing to note that baller is the parent class of team baller. And so here you can see that we're actually overriding the baller's version of pass ball, right? We are having to write our own version of this method that does almost the exact same thing, but adds these print statements that tell us what the team or the cheering would be. And so from the parameters, we're going to have self and other. With any method defined in a class, we know the self attribute will refer to the instance that we're calling the method on, and the other will just be a parameter, which could be another instance, it could be a numeric, we don't really know. But in this case, it's going to be another instance. And so the first thing that we've noticed through this method is that we really do need to track whether or not the ball has been passed. And so we need to determine whether or not it's been passed in order to print certain statements. And lastly, we have to return whether or not it was passed. And so here it would make sense to have a did pass variable in order to track if passing has occurred. And so we're going to default this to a false value, right? It could be true. We could have defaulted it to be true, but in this case, I just chose to make it false. And then from here, we want to change did pass to true if the ball was passed, right? So this is probably the hardest part of this problem. How do we determine if the ball was passed? Because currently, if we call pass ball for a team baller instance, it will revert to this pass ball method defined within team ball. And we don't want that. Ideally, we will use the did pass method in the parent class because we know that this will return whether or not the ball was passed. And this is a little abstracted away, but with inheritance and object-oriented programming, it's important that we get used to this. And so how do we call the parent class instead of the team baller class? The way we do this is through directly accessing baller to this notation. And we access baller, and from there, we can do baller.passBall. After we do baller.passBall, we're going to use the same parameters, that being self and other. And so we can note here that self is a necessary parameter just because we are using the class to access the method. And so there is no self in the words before the dot. So generally, what I'm trying to emphasize is that if we were to have an instance, and if we were to call, we do some instance dot method, we would already have the self variable just from the instance itself. And so here, let's say baller.passBall is true. We want did pass to also be true. So let's note that here. From here, our next step is realizing that we probably need to print certain statements based on whether or not the ball was passed. And so if the ball was passed, right? So if did pass, let's print yay, right? So this is straight from the dog test. It's not really related to inheritance at the moment. Now, let's say this is not the case. Let's say the ball was not passed. We're going to print I don't have the ball. So this makes sense, which is straight from the doc test. Now the last thing the method wants us to do is just return if the ball was passed or not, which is the same as just returning did pass. And so here, the main takeaways to understand is that with inheritance, the subclass will be a version of the parent class, meaning that a team baller is a baller. And because of that, inherits its methods, instance variables, constructors. And so here, we use that fact so that we could call baller.passBall on self and other. And lastly, we know that when we override a method, we are effectively replacing it only for team baller objects. And so I hope this was helpful, and I hope you all have a good day.